from being able to press into that communion that we talk about. It's so critically important. I pray that you have taken these words about forgiveness to heart, and as you have applied them and you have sought out, or you are seeking out even as we speak, any area of unforgiveness, any area where relationship has been broken or shattered. You may not be able to restore the relationship from both sides, but you can restore it from your side. And we want to talk about that this morning. We frequently talk in the church about relationship being having two directions. There's this relationship and there's this relationship. There's the vertical and there's the horizontal. What perhaps we don't talk about as much is how one affects the other, how they both affect. So the stronger our vertical relationship is, the more power and authority there is in our lives to break any bonds or any bondages or any hindrances or any unforgiveness or any broken relationship in our horizontal relationships. And the inverse is also true. If your horizontal relationships are messed up, they will decrease your power to enter into the vertical relationship. Because everything in life, in eternity, and from the foundations of the world, from going back to before we can even chart any history, everything is about relationship. God makes a point back in the great Shema of the Israelite people in Deuteronomy. The Shema, the confession, is simply the Lord our God, the Lord is one. That one is not the number one. It is the Hebrew word for unity. The Lord our God is a unity. He is in union with himself. He is in communion with himself. From before history, from this whole plan, birthed in the relationship within the Godhead, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, intimacy on the deepest possible level, and union and communion on the deepest possible level. We are created out of that. This world is created out of that being, out of that relationship. And that's why everything is about relationship. And where relationships between you and others are damaged from your side, not from the other side, but from your side, that affects that relationship. And let's face it, the world has taught us to be people pleasers, to be, concerned about what other people think and how they are, and that the enemy can use that to overwhelm us in terms of our own responsibilities or understandings of responsibilities. I hope we can get to chat about that a little bit this morning as we look at a particular text. But how many of you sometimes feel stressed? How many of you can trace that stress to other people or other things going on around you? A few hands, but you're all saying yes inside. You get angry, why? Stuff going on around you. Relationship problems. See, we have learned to allow our, not only just our freedom, but our responsibility for things to be dependent on what other people are doing. And when we allow that to happen, let's do a little work. Get there so don't get confused. So forgiveness is about relationships. Skip the next slide if you would, Trina, because we went through that. But I want you to look at this because this is about, there are two scriptures, only two in the Gospels, that talk about the church. This is one of them. The other one is in Matthew 16. And we will eventually, in the next several weeks, probably look at both of them. I just give you a summary here because I want to get to the parts that are underlined. Interesting that came up in the pre-message this morning before we went into worship. If your brother sins against you, this is a passage that talks about whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Interesting passage. All of that work is predicated on what follows. If two of you agree That means relationship, doesn't it? How are you going to agree on anything if you don't have relationship? And if you have stuff going on between you and somebody else that you haven't healed from your side, then that affects the relationship. Again, understand, we don't have the authority, nor do we have the responsibility to change how other people relate to us. Jesus was a master at demonstrating this, as we will look at in just a moment. We only have a responsibility about how we relate to others, which is just like God. He takes full responsibility for his relationship to us, so full that the cross is the means he used to make sure nothing could get in the way of his relationship to us. He said Jesus died on the cross so that forgiveness is carte blanche. It is everywhere, all the time. The universe is filled with the forgiveness of God. His relationship towards us is secure. Nothing can affect it. Nothing can affect it. From his side. From our side? Well, that's our responsibility. Now, thank God he gives us his Spirit so that we can worship and pray and move in and press in and, continually deepen that relationship from our side and get all this stuff out of the way. But that's both vertical and horizontal. But this unity, this relationship thing is so critically important. If two of you agree on earth, he's talking to the church. This whole thing is to the church. About anything they ask, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. But I would suggest to you that that agreement is much more than just surface. We are in agreement in putting Jesus first. We are in agreement that nothing stands in the way of our relationship with each other or him. We are in agreement in pressing into those things. So he says again, if two of you agree on anything on earth about anything, this is probably, how many of you would say this is one of the best known passages in the church? The agreement passage. I mean, you hear it all the time. It just comes rolling out of our mouth. For where two or three are gathered in my name, and see, here's the key. There am I among them. That's what gives the power to relationship. That's what gives the power to agreement. That's why we press in more and more to know him. So, a bunch of this stuff I want to skip. Struggled with it all night. It just wasn't right. You know what? Let's watch this video. I want to take you to and ask you to look at a very familiar miracle in the Gospels. That's really about relationship and how two different parties deal with relationship, and it challenges us to look at how we ourselves deal with relationships. The familiar miracle is the woman taken in adultery. And I want you to think about, well, let's just watch this conversation.
I've been caught outright and dragged straight into open daylight. Bystanders gawking, the village women absorbing every morsel of gossip. Common decency dictated that the shame of the moment was enough. But the law called for something greater. My life. Of course, a long audience followed behind them. Their words condemned me, but they didn't dare look me in the eye. I did everything to try to cover my shame, but I couldn't hide from the onlookers or this holy man whose feet they threw me to. I was finished. I stared at the ground when he said that whoever was sinless, they should go first. They should throw the first stone. squeezed my eyes shut, grasping at the gravel, waiting for the end of my life to unfold. Nothing though. Then footsteps. Except they were walking away. I looked up. Is there no one left to accuse you? He asked me. No. I don't either. He said, go and sin no more. Accusers. That's how he ended up on the cross. And as he hung there dying, he didn't say, I am finished. He said, it is finished. That's something different. That's a different thing. It means that something is accomplished, restored. He restored my hope, my self-respect, and my dignity. I didn't even know I had any left. On a day when I thought that my life was finished, the only man there holy enough to demand justice handed me mercy.
Give that parable as being about many things, but it's about relationship. It is about relationship. Let's take a look at Trina, slide number 8, I think, or someplace over there, where the words are here. Let's just read the words and look at them again. Look at what happened. Then I'm going to ask you, what is the difference? How would you describe the differences between Jesus and the scribes and Pharisees? You see, I think that Jesus is his relational paradigm. His way of relating to people is what we need to be aspiring to. And it's what will open our hearts more and more to worship and oneness with Him. I think more often the world is dealing with relationships that look more like the scribes and the Pharisees. And I encourage you to just think about your own personal relationships and any relationships in which you are struggling. And ask yourself, from your side, does how you are dealing and thinking and operating look more like Jesus or more like the scribes and the Pharisees? Scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman taken in adultery. I wonder where we would be in that with you. If we were on the sides, who we would be thinking about, especially if we didn't know who Jesus was. You know, he was just this guy who's supposedly a teacher and smarter than everybody around. Now he set her in the midst. They told him, teacher, we found this woman in adultery in the very act. Now in our law, Moses commanded us to stone her. What then do you say about her? Now inserted right in here, and I left it out, is a passage that says, they said this to him because they were trying to trap him. They were trying to manipulate him. They were trying to use this situation to manipulate Jesus, trick him, lead him into a place where they could accuse him. And again, you know, that's one of the things we really need to look out for in our own relationships. And we aren't using manipulative tactics and condemning tactics and withholding relationship tactics and unforgiveness tactics and bitterness tactics in order to manipulate people into doing what we want them to do. You want to be stressed, carry that out for a while. That'll stress you, trying to accomplish that. To use manipulation and figure all kinds of things out in order to get somebody else in your family or your relationship or whatever it is to do what you want them to do. Jesus stooped down and wrote on the ground with his finger. But when they continued asking him, he looked up and he said to them, he who is without sin among you, let him throw the first stone at her. Second part. Again, he stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground. They, when they heard it, being convicted by their conscience, went out one by one, beginning from the oldest even to the last. And Jesus was left alone with the woman where she was in the middle. Jesus, standing up, saw her and said, "Woman, where are your accusers? Did no one condemn you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go your way. From now on, sin no more." So let me ask you, where is Jesus coming from in the relationship? Number one, does he have the right to be offended?
Yeah.
Of course he does. Because he's part of that union, Trinity union. He's the only one there who really has the right to be offended, who really has the right to react. That's not how Jesus does relationship. And if we're his people, that's not how we should be doing relationship. And again, isn't most of our difficulty in relationship found in some place on either offense or that we feel like we have the right to stand where we are because of what somebody else has done? Isn't that true? What else do you see? It's the Pharisees. If the Pharisees are a picture of the world, and even sometimes the church and us, and Jesus is the goal, what else do you see? Woody?
Pharisees are focused on themselves. Jesus is focused on doing the will of the Father.